Every sport has their own stories of unusual things that happened a long time ago. Then they get passed down from one generation of sports fans to the next, and they achieve legendary status. However, there is one instance of an unusual thing happening in Canadian football history that has not been super well documented or remembered. And that was the only fourth down in CFL history. The date was September 21st, 1969. Montreal was visiting Hamilton's Civic Stadium for a matchup that meant a fair bit for Montreal especially, as the playoffs were approaching, and the crossover rule had not been invented yet. Why does that matter? Well, because Montreal had a highly unusual record of 0-5-2, and Hamilton was 6-0-1. Incredibly, Montreal's record had not eliminated them from the playoffs, even in a realistic sense. The game ended up 41-35 for the Alouettes on a touchdown pass with 35 seconds remaining, but they may have only won because of this fourth down. After a scoreless first quarter, Montreal was within 10 yards of the end zone. The newspaper reports of this game seem to agree that the down marker was certainly wrong at some point. How exactly this happened is unclear, but Hamilton was convinced that this led to the Alouettes being given an extra down, on which Montreal got a short yardage touchdown to make the score 6-0. The Alouettes said they got a first down somewhere in their drive that Hamilton must have missed. When Hamilton's coach Joe Restick complained about the extra down to the officials, they said they would check it out in the game film, to which Restick responded after the game, "But how does that help me at that time?" He had a point. They can't change the score or anything after the game. So what did the film have to say? Well, unfortunately for Hamilton, the person in charge of making the film accidentally overdeveloped it or some kind of error like that in the processing room, meaning they couldn't file an official protest because they had no evidence. However, the league was still very concerned about this. They were offered television footage to review it. Whatever the footage the league ended up getting, possibly Montreal's film of it if it was produced separately, proved that yes, Montreal had indeed scored their first touchdown on a fourth down. The game was considered for replaying in full, but ultimately it didn't happen, probably because of the difference in the records between the two teams. A 41-35 game was considered exceptionally high scoring back in 1969, and the fourth quarter box score of 21-20 would still be very impressive today. Funnily enough, this was not the first time that season that a Montreal-Hamilton game had a potentially disastrous refereeing error. Earlier in the season, the exact same teams were playing in the exact same stadium when the power on one half of the stadium went out. I'm assuming this means one side parallel to the sidelines rather than one side of the 55-yard line. Toward the end of the game, around 11 p.m. local time, Montreal scored a touchdown while trailing 22-15. The conversion attempt was needed for the tie. The kick went up, and the referee under the upright initially motioned with his hands quite low, making the hometown crowd think that Montreal's kicker had missed and the Ticats had won. No one could really tell from the stands if it had gone in or not because it was so dark. The public address system was also not working, so information could not be relayed to everyone super clearly. But eventually the refs decided that it must have gone in, and the game ended 22-22. The moral of the story is, if the Alouettes are coming to town in 1969, and that town is Hamilton, expect things to not go in your favor. If you like these kinds of stories, please feel free to leave a comment, subscribe, like, etc. And if you know of any other cool stories like this you want me to cover, send me an email or include it in your comment. I've actually reached out to Secret Base recently to request that they do a video about the time when the Bombers lost because the scoreboard operator in BC made them think they had one more point than they actually did. I haven't heard back yet, but hopefully something good comes from that will bring these stories to a wider audience of sports fans.